Alrighty, I covered for this final paper a feature film called Bye Bye Africa, which coincidentally it is the 20th anniversary of the release of this film. This is by the filmmaker Mahamat Saleh Haroun, and it is considered the first feature film from Chad ever. Likewise, critics of the film have often highlighted that point, and I will argue today, not gotten deeper into the film's themes of identity, which I really enjoyed the Munoz reading on disidentification, and I'm looking to transfer that over to nationality and cultures associated with nationality today. So I got kind of an argument, and I would love your counter arguments. And of course, Munoz cites Connolly explaining identity as a site of struggle where fixed dispositions clash against constituted definitions. So keep that in mind. So beyond the first feature, to the disidentification of Mahamat Saleh Haroun. But first, to warm up the audience, baby pictures of Bentley. Okay, back to Haroun. Haroun is not only directing and producing this film, Bye Bye Africa. Haroun is the lead protagonist, acting as what you might imagine is sort of an autobiographical but slightly fictionalized version of his own life. He receives a call in the middle of the night in France, where he has left Chad to study film and pursue a career in filmmaking, that his mother has passed away. So he's speaking here in Arabic, in his mother tongue, and he says he'll head down on the first flight available. Also in Arabic, you can see Haroun is married to what appears to be a French woman who, even though he's receiving news of his mother's death, she's not bothered to wake up, which is evidence that, yes, some marriages are weird, not all, some are weird. But real talk, Haroun here is showing his ties to the identity of his birthland with the use of Arabic. In a following sequence, he explains to his children that he'll be leaving to see their grandmother's funeral in Chad. And they have never visited Chad. They ask, "Dad, when can we go?" And he says, "One day when your mother no longer considers it dangerous." All right, so we're making some assumptions here in the backstory of the character, but we can tell that this character likely has already had to assimilate to a degree to the majority culture that dominates the space in which he lives, but is also, we could say, counter-identifying and pushing back on that, or maybe suppressing that counter-identification in his own life. So he heads to the airport, boards a plane, lands in N'Djamena, the capital city of Chad. Cue the music, and we have Bye Bye Africa. The film shows Haroun with his father quite a bit at the beginning. Haroun's father in this very poetic scene, very long take, they walk in a field, and Haroun has a camera in hand. He's actually taking video as they walk. And the father says, "We still don't understand what you do." All right, so raise your hand if you've heard that before. But Haroun's father is actually, I think, representing the differences that now Haroun has coming back to the culture of his birthland. All right. And funnily, the father says, "You sent us a videotape once, and we didn't understand what it was about." Freud says, I'm sorry, Haroun says, "Oh yeah, that was that video on Sigmund Freud." So I don't know why this is put into the script here, but a little bit of callback to our own class. Haroun, to sort of experience the visual mediation of life with his father, to reminisce, to celebrate his own craft of filmmaking, they actually set up a projector at home and watch videos of his recently passed away mother. And suddenly the father's eyes light up and he says, it's all coming back to me, I remember it now. This was it was on your sister's wedding day. Your mother was so beautiful. Your mother was such a beautiful one. And Haroun uses this as an excuse to kind of defend his craft, talking about how cinema creates memories. Now, in this situation, as well as at the beginning when he received the phone call, he switches to voiceover to explain sort of his own poetic gist during this film. And each time he chooses to use French. Okay? Now, French is the colonial language in Chad. It's also the language of the intelligentsia, in a sense. And it's a very interesting point that Haroun chooses to do so in his films. And this is not the last film to do so. Many of his feature films would use extensive amounts of French to what I would argue is an unnatural degree. And I've talked to him about it, and he kind of dismisses it. He's just, you know, the language I choose to use, the language I choose to use. But I think there's a deeper message here. All right, Haroun's nephew is watching the old home videos with them, Ali, his name, and says, I want to make films one day too. More on Ali in a bit. Haroun's having a tough time. He decides that with his mother's death, the only way to cope is to retreat to his love of filmmaking. He decides to make a film. Ironically, the film that he is writing the script for is called, you guessed it, Bye Bye Africa. So, Bye Bye Africa within Bye Bye Africa.
I didn't guess.
Right. Introduce Haroun's friend Garba. Garba was actually the person that shot that old home video they were watching, so he's a close family friend. Haroun talks about how Garba, and this is real life people, by the way, so this is a fictionalized, again, autobiography. How Garba used to run the major cinema in N'Djamena, La Normandie, Le Normandie, and it says that going as a kid into the cinema when Garba was running the projections was his first inspiration into filmmaking. That Garba himself went on and made films, but abandoned it, facing a dire economic situation for artists, and is now farming, right? So Haroun's recruiting Garba, his inspiration, to come back into the space of filmmaking to make this film to cope with his mother's death. They go to a government office. Government minister is delighted to read the script of the film. This is a great story. Awesome, I'm so glad someone's gonna shoot a movie. I don't have any money anymore to fund films. In fact, we had to let go the boy who would go and bring us tea. We couldn't even afford to keep him on, that's what he says. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, how burned out are you at the moment? Okay. All right, so I have a theory here. I think as you encounter obstacles, hardship, you encounter walls in many senses, that's gonna speed along this process of, roughly speaking, identity formation and maybe more specifically, disidentification. Haroun, in a very poetic part of the film, decides, you know what, we don't need your money. We're going to go and make this film no matter what. And they're shooting some footage in the market, and a guy goes crazy, coming up trying to grab the camera and break it, and says, you know, what is he doing? He can't film us, he's a foreigner. Which is, yeah, you got it. Back to Ali, the nephew. Remember he said, I wanted to make films one day too. Ali, in a sort of a side story of this film, begins making his own fake camera, like a little model camera he can run around with. Haroun realizes that his nephew's got some cinema leanings, and he takes him to a film set. Ironically, awesomely, coincidentally, whateverly, there is another feature film being shot, the second feature film ever to come out of Chad, called Dar es Salaam. And they actually go to the real set of this. It's pretty badass. All right, spoiler alert, at the end of the film, Haroun has burned out largely and returns to France, saying, one day I'll come back and shoot my Bye Bye Africa. For now, Ali, my nephew, you take my camera and you send me a video every month. So, what does Ali represent for us? Well, nephews are cool. That's pretty much it. And my brother's gonna have, I was gonna baby soon. I'm gonna be an uncle and nephew. Okay. All right. So back to Haroun and Garba. They're running around town. Haroun runs into a former fling, Isabel. Isabel was an actor in one of his short films before, and she's distraught. She says, "Your film it ruined my reputation. I was shamed for acting. My family wasn't ready for this." In a frightening scene, a chilling scene towards the end of the film, Haroun encounters Isabel at a nightclub, and it cut in a dreamlike sequence, going back between both of their faces. She tells him, "I'm not a fictional character. I'm real. I'm a real person." So, Bye Bye Africa does have kind of a sad spin at the end. Haroun is distraught. Death is near. And we've got one final slide here. Is Haroun's isolated status an anomaly? Is this something just bizarre? Or are there more Harouns out there in a metaphorical sense? All right. Final quote from his father: "The day that you belong there, you will lose your soul." Can I play 1 minute of the film? Just part of the... Yeah?
وهسه وقت كان بقيت دكتور لا أما لسه تقدر تداوي خدمة أنا دكتور ده خدمة مهمة لكن السينما ده نفع شنو؟ دار النصارى ده حلو لكن دار ما دار الدكتور دار كان يوم أنت فكر بس من ده أنت دكتور خلاص. الله أكبر دي ماما نتذكر ده في بعد أنا أخذ نتذكر أي لحظة
ده قلبه بس سواء أسوار
ما جوابنا صحيح أما في زمانه مرة جميلة
أنا أقول أمريكا قبل الدور السياسي
Eh bien, tu vois, c'est pour la mémoire que je fais du cinéma. Il y a un grand homme qui s'appelle Jean-Luc Godard qui a dit « Le cinéma fabrique des souvenirs ».
كلام هذا صحيح وفي دربه رفيقة.
All right. So thank you.